Welcome back to the WSU Democrats podcast. My name is Ethan Bishop. I'm the president of the organization.
I'm Vaughan. I'm the vice president.
And today we got a packed episode for y'all. We're going to be talking about the Alex Preddy murder. We're going to be talking about the Epstein files. We're going to be talking about how Liam Ramos returned home. We're going to talk about Iran, and we're also going to talk about the arrest of Don Lemon. So Vaughan helped us out with the script. So we're going to go off that and add the context and do whatever we need to spit facts and logic today. So, yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So with Alex Preddy, I'll start with him. There was a video released that was taken 11 days before his murder, and I'm just going to call it a murder. The video shows him. He's being very aggressive towards federal agents. He spits on them, and then he kicks their tail light so hard that it breaks, and then they get out of the vehicle and they take him down, and looks like they kind of want to detain him, but then he was just released later. And then why this is significant is the right is using this to justify the murder and saying he's violent, he wanted to do damage and harm, and that is why he was killed. But I think it's the opposite. It proves that it wasn't justified, more that it was premeditated. They knew him, and it could have been different ICE agents, the day that they killed him, and then this incident that happened 11 days prior. But they, because he was being a lot less aggressive the day he was murdered. But I think this just makes this premeditated. I don't agree with Alex Preddy being aggressive towards federal agents and kicking the taillight out. I'm not supported that at all. I've also said that I don't support impeding ICE operations. I think that just does more harm than good. However, doing so does not deserve the death penalty. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it shows that when he kicked out the taillight and all that, you can actually see from the video that he had his gun on him during that interaction. And I feel like if they did detain him for a little bit, I watched the video a few days ago, but I'd imagine they could tell he had the gun too, and they didn't shoot him. So it goes to show, it's not, I know this might sound bad, but it's not all ICE agents that will literally just murder you for nothing. If it was that, we'd have a lot more people getting murdered. But it does show that the people who did murder Alex Preddy, who are now on administrative leave, luckily, that they should have been put on administrative leave, and they need to go to jail, in my opinion. I think the video evidence directly shows that they murdered Alex Preddy, and I think that there is a wider conversation going on about whether it is accurate or politically, what's the word for it? If it's adequate and politically aware to call things like this murder right as it happened, because I was calling it murder in our last podcast when it was pretty recent and all that, just through the video evidence and all that. Yeah. And I think on the one hand, we should wait until there's a full investigation if it is not clear. I think with Renee Good, it definitely was less clear than it is with Alex Preddy. But at the same time, whether they're charged with murder legally or it's been completely adjudicated, I think it's fine to an extent. Because I think what a lot of people get wrong is that murder is not a legal term. They say it's a legal term because, there's first-degree, second-degree murder. But guess what? The Holocaust was legal, okay? That wasn't considered murder. Slavery was not considered kidnapping and trafficking and all that. That was not considered these things. But looking back at history, we rightfully call it what it is because these are moral terms. There's a reason why it applies. That's why vegans say that animals are getting murdered, even though, and then the non-vegans say, oh, well, that's a moral term, or no, that's a legal term. No, it's not, because look at all these places throughout history. If someone killed you today in cold blood and they didn't for some reason they beat the case, did they not murder you? It's no. So yeah, I want to just be done with that real quick. But then also, just kicking out a taillight and all that stuff, you shouldn't do that. How Renee Good, she tried to drive away like that. I don't think she should have done that. But at the same time, this is just lack of training. There's no reason why these people should just be getting killed for absolutely no reason when they weren't an active threat to anyone's life. Okay, and I think that since they were put on administrative leave, I read that Renee Good's shooter was also put on administrative leave, which is good. But I think what's also good about that is that I think it's going directly through Trump, because there would not be any action taken against them if it weren't for Trump, because his whole administration has been saying, oh, he was coming ready to massacre ICE agents and stuff like that. Oh, he was a domestic terrorist. They wouldn't just flip on that, without Trump's consent. Greg Bovino wouldn't be demoted and sent back to California if it weren't for that. Kristi Noem wouldn't be on. It seems like she's on thin ice from the reporting I've seen in the Trump administration. So at least that's good. I think that, and I also saw another article just detailing how just the narrative that Trump made, because it has been officially ruled a homicide.
Really,
Alex Preddy.
Yeah.
In the investigation, so like their narrative just completely failed. And I think that honestly, this is a point where maybe Trump was smart enough to know that, like, maybe what got to him was the fact that all these Second Amendment freaks were like, oh, he's tried to kill, or he had a gun and they tried to use that as a justification to kill him. So they all got all super pissed off about that. And then Trump is smart enough to see when he's doing something that pisses off his own base to that extent. He definitely does. And he's not exactly the type of politician to lick his finger and put it in the air and see where the wind blows, kind of like maybe Biden was more like that. But Trump, he definitely has his own vindictive and egotistical and childish brain on him. That's why he tried to overturn the 2020 election, and he keeps on saying that it was rigged, even though that's not politically advantageous towards him, because in 2022, he handpicked all of these election-denying candidates for the midterms, and basically all of them lost races they were supposed to win. So he's not completely politically in tune, but I think in cases where he doesn't really care that much, he will just flip on a dime to whatever, people are thinking. And in this case, Alex Preddy, I keep on wanting to call him Daniel Preddy for some reason. It just so happened that it was too much for him and he caved in, which is a good thing, but I don't want to give him too much credit because these were the same people just calling them a domestic terrorist and blocking Minnesota from investigating. I believe there is still blockades on them investigating, even though they're now saying it was a homicide.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right that Trump will, flip on a dime, and there's the acronym TACO, Trump always chickens out. That's very true. And he does care about his approval rating. And when it goes down, you'll see he kind of, flips on things that you previously thought he'd be pretty, hard fast on. But, so yeah, the federal agents that have been put on administrative leave, that's a step in the right direction for sure, because we know that Trump would like to, and Kristi Noem would like to, give these ICE agents just complete immunity so that they can continue to do this without fear of prosecution. I did just see, just before coming here, that the mayor of Chicago just passed an executive order that allows them to prosecute ICE agents and Border Patrol agents. So I'd like to see, because it's just within Chicago, where it kind of goes with that, and if there's a domino effect, goes to other states and other cities where we can actually see prosecution for these, criminal misconduct. So that's good news as well. But if you don't have anything else, move on.
Well, I just wanted to add to that last point, like, with municipalities and all that, they can actually criminalize ICE agents when they're committing crimes in their jurisdiction. They absolutely can stop them. The issue is what the federal government could argue is if the ICE agent is carrying out their official duties, and it conflicts with the state or with the state or locality statutes and all that, they can't actually enforce anything that goes against the federal government because of the supremacy clause in the Constitution. So the federal government is above this state as well as the locality, so they can't do anything to stop them. That being said, if the federal government acts outside of their bounds and they are actually doing things that are illegal in the jurisdiction, they can absolutely arrest them. And Trump will try to stop them from getting arrested, maybe. At this point, it sounds like maybe he will just throw them to the wolves if they do actually something as bad as some of these people did. And honestly, like, it's not all that surprising. Like, even back in 2020 with Derek Chauvin, yes, Trump was very crass with all the Black Lives Matter protesters and all that, but he actually condemned the murder of George Floyd. Like he said that Derek Chauvin, the police officer that kneeled on his
Really?
neck for like 12 minutes, was it more than that? I can't even remember. But yeah, he said that George Floyd was murdered, and he said that, and Derek Chauvin did end up getting, I think he got life in prison. Um, and Trump supported that. Even though a lot on the right was like, "Oh, George Floyd he died of a drug overdose," and all this shit. It was obviously bullshit. Um, just to justify a black man being murdered by a police officer. That's just a harrowing video. I think we forget about that, and that's honestly what it reminds me of. A lot of these ICE videos, just people getting murdered and all that for nothing, and then just the spectacle of the government murdering its own citizens is just so powerful that it incited the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, and now it's inciting the protests of 2026. So it's very interesting, and both times I think it will translate in a Democratic victory, because it did in 2020, and I think it will in 2026 for the midterms. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that Trump condemned George Floyd's murder. That's very surprising to me.
it was low key one of the few times he was based, and not a lot of people on the left acknowledged that he said that, but like. Because here's the thing, multiple things can be true at the same time. I don't want anyone to hear me say, "Oh, he condemned the murder of George Floyd," and then be like, "Oh, Trump was such a good guy." Like, no, that's one singular action. Okay, because even someone like Biden, who I agreed with a lot of what he did, I think a lot of what Biden did was great. Like the largest investment in fighting climate change ever in American history with the Inflation Reduction Act, invested in clean energy, the first bipartisan gun safety bill in 30 years. Actually had Republican support. No one thought he could ever possibly get that done. Bipartisan infrastructure bill, invested in red states because he wanted to be a president for all Americans. And I still disagree with a lot of what he did, like, for example, like the Israeli aid and stuff like that. But like, just to point out and give credit where credit is due, it's not a complete and utter endorsement of a candidate, and I hope people understand that. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. It should be common sense that if you support, one thing that someone says doesn't mean you support everything they say, because that definitely applies to me for a lot of different people.
yeah.
But you can talk about Don Lemon getting arrested. So Don Lemon is a former CNN news anchor and current independent journalist, and he was taken into custody around 11 p.m. on January 29th in L.A. and the hotel he was staying at. They arrested him because for his actions at the St. Paul church service that got interrupted by anti-ICE protesters. These protesters were there and disrupted this church service because of the congressman who was there who had voted to fund ICE and give them however many billions, that we just passed. And yeah, so they were against that, calling out the names of people that ICE had killed, disrupting the church service. And the reason that people got arrested for this, because it wasn't just him, I think it was like 8 people, is because of the First Amendment. You have, I can't remember exactly, you could probably say it better. But
Freedom of speech?
Yeah, but like within a church,
Yeah.
there, I don't know, I'm trying
You
to
can't
remember.
disrupt religious or
Yeah.
holy and worship services. That's one of the
Exactly.
protected institutions. You can't disrupt someone from practicing their faith. That's something that's carved out in the First Amendment, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the basis of why they were being arrested, but it's also the reason that Don Lemon is protected, because there's an important distinction between the protesters who interrupted the church service and Don Lemon and others who were independent journalists who were quietly filming and documenting the whole situation. They were not protesting. And Don Lemon got released like 2 days later without bail, and he came on saying that it's important to make this distinction because the people that did interrupt the protest, they did commit a crime and should be tried, but the First Amendment protects him to just be there and document it and not participate in actually interrupting the service. So his official charges have not been made public yet. He can't remember when they probably don't even have a court date yet. So we'll see where that goes with that. I don't think that that case is really going to go anywhere with Don Lemon in particular. However, Trump really doesn't like Don Lemon. He's a very, very strong anti-Trump voice. He's been trying to silence him for a long time now, and this was kind of his. He saw him details laid out, and he thought he'd take this advantage and try and get at him, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I was watching a video about this earlier. One of the reasons why they're trying to prosecute Don Lemon, even though he was just recording it, is because he did make a comment where he said thank you to one of the protesters. And he said thank you. Charge him with a crime, arrest him. And then also, beforehand, he was with the protesters, and he was cutting off the mic so that people couldn't hear them coordinating the disruption. So that was what the DOJ kind of looked at, and they were like, yeah, he was aiding them pretty much. It's such bullshit. That should not rise to the level where they're actually going to arrest a journalist. That should be a very, very high bar. But Trump doesn't care, because that's one thing he has followed through on. He said he was going to prosecute his political opponents, and that's what he's tried to do. And in some ways, more terrifyingly than we even expected, because just look at who he's been trying to prosecute. The Attorney General of New York for going after him, Letitia James, James Comey, the former FBI director, Jerome Powell, literally the Fed chair. And I think Jaden pointed out last time how bad countries go when the executive takes hold of the national bank, because then they just make that their own piggy bank and just completely fuck the economy. Mm-hmm. And now you have Don Lemon as well, an actual journalist who he got kicked off of CNN. I forget exactly why. I think there was some kind of scandal with him. Nothing that should, honestly, I'm a big fan. Well, I don't want to say that necessarily for all things, but for second chances and all that. And I think that he should have just been left alone. He's doing his own thing. He's an independent journalist. A lot of people like to listen to him and watch him. And if they're trying to get support on their side, that's not how they're going to do it. Because it does not look good to arrest a journalist because people broke into, or they didn't even break into a church. They walked in and they just started shouting things. It's do I think they should have done that in a church service? Do I think it makes sense to have protections for freedom of worship? Absolutely. But do I think that this is this should be some huge national story? No. Do I think that this is being handled with proportionate force in which it should be? No. This has been made political, because if it wasn't broadcasted, they probably wouldn't have even been charged, or it would have just been some kind of citation by the police or something. But because it was this huge spectacle and the Republicans are triggered, they're out for blood, and they feel like there has to be some kind of accountability, which there probably should to some extent, but this is not how you do it. This is just weaponizing, this is just weaponizing the government against your political opponents, at least in the case of arresting Don Lemon.
Yeah, you need in any government, in any country, you need an opposition voice in kind of all aspects, and you need people who are going to question the government and hold people accountable. And when you get rid of those people, I mean, we have seen what happens, with authoritarian regimes. And that's what Trump is trying to do. He tried to get Jimmy Kimmel off air using the FCC, weaponizing the chairman of the FCC. And like you brought up Jerome Powell, his term is expected to end in May, and Trump wants to get his own guy in that seat. So that could be very bad news. You get all these people who are just loyal to Trump above all else, and we see where that goes.
Yep.
So Epstein files, there's a lot here. So just a few days ago, 3 million new documents were released, naming a lot of people that we haven't seen before, like Elon Musk. There's a lot of emails, pictures, very, very disturbing stuff in the files. When it comes to Elon Musk in particular, I think that this story is kind of funny. And I will say that this is not this is just my personal opinion of how I view it, so I'm not saying it is fact, but Elon Musk went on X saying that he never visited the island, which is true, and he wants to distance himself from all of that because he was named in the emails, and he's saying, hey, I never went to the island, just so you know. But if you look at the emails, there's basically multiple exchanges between Musk and Epstein directly. Basically, Musk is begging Epstein if he can come to the island. Like, please let me come with all these important people and have a good time on the island. And Epstein either said, no, you can't come, or stating that it was temporarily closed for some reason. So I like to believe that he thought Musk was too much of a chud to visit his Grand Ole Island. But that's just my opinion. So other information in the files. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So there's a story about a Mexican actress named Gabriela Jimenez. And in 2009 in Monterrey, Mexico, she attended a private event including wealthy individuals related to Epstein and in his sex trafficking ring. And after the event, she was recorded on camera having a hysterical breakdown, claiming the people she witnessed, this is quoting her, ate humans, they eat humans, the rich people, the important people. I saw it with my own eyes. She goes on to say, they are going to kill me. They are going to kill me if I talk. Shortly after that, she was detained by Mexican authorities, and she was never seen again. So there is almost nothing I could come up with to suggest that what she said wasn't at least partial truth, giving her very random disappearance. But there's a lot of this kind of genre of information in the new release of files where there's nothing really incriminating so far. I mean, there's 3 million of new stuff that's going to come out, but there's a lot of evidence suggesting things, and a lot of evidence or documents that lead you to believe something, but there's really no hard evidence to formally prosecute people. And I watched a video of this guy named Michael Knowles. I think he's a conservative. Right, yeah. He said his hot take in his video was that all the incriminating information we have on Epstein, we already know all of it, and we're not going to get any more from the files, which I kind of do see what he's saying, because as we see in these files, it's like you have, for example, one email where Epstein wrote, I love the torture video. And, that could mean anything. Given his background, it, could be something that actually means just literally it means that, or it could be something else, but there's nothing that really is hard incriminating evidence, which makes it hard to bring these people to justice.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of this stuff is it is just allegations. Even the emails between them, you could consider an allegation of themselves even. But so all of this is not confirmed to be 100% true, but I think with all of this in the files, like some parts of it is definitely going to have to be true. And when you look at I don't know if you have anything else on the Epstein files, but there was also a report that Trump was trying to measure little girls' vulvas, by putting his finger in their vagina, and trying to see how tight they were, basically. And I know that's very graphic. I probably should have said something before I said that to be like, yeah, don't listen if you can't handle things that graphic. But that's absolutely disgusting. But I could definitely see him doing that. I don't want to say it's 100% true, but when you walked in on women at beauty pageants you owned, you also own the Miss Teen USA. The allegations, he walked in on them as well. It's just absolutely disgusting what is said in these files, and I wish there was just more. I wish there was just more information, and I wish there was more ways that we could actually hold these people accountable. Like I saw a meme that said, "Oh, the DOJ releasing all these horrible shit and not arresting a single person." It's kind of hard for them to arrest a single person because, like I said, it is all just allegations, but what we can do is look at the totality of the evidence and look at what might actually have evidence to ourselves and come to our own conclusions based on that. And I think that's why it was so important that Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna got the discharge petition through to get this out in front of the American people so we can make our own conclusions for ourselves, even if they aren't prosecuted in the court of law. But yeah, it's absolutely disgusting stuff. I hope nothing like this ever happens again. But the only other thing I would say is if that actress was saying they were eating people, I would just kind of steer, well, I don't know, because I don't want to say this if it is true, but there's also the famous QAnon conspiracy theory where there's this elite, cabal of rich people who are satanic and they eat babies.
Yeah.
And they drink something called adrenochrome, which makes them immortal, basically. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, that's so dumb. So the only reason I'm saying this is I just don't want to play into that conspiracy theory particularly, because also a big part of that is that Donald Trump he's in on exposing QAnon, even though he's shy about it and he doesn't ever come out and say QAnon. He reposts posts from accounts that do talk about QAnon, and they're very, very much conspiracy theorists. So he basically does dog whistle for QAnon, but he's never come out and say QAnon is true. So he's played into it, but now I think there's a narrative that he might be in on it, or he's just not doing anything about it because now he's been in office the second time as well, and it seems like nothing is happening, and he was involved in the Epstein files. There's also reporting that he had kicked Jeffrey Epstein out, or they had a falling out at some point. It's disputed on when. I think it was like there was a time with like 2004. There was also a time in 2008 where they said that Trump and Epstein had a falling out, and one of the times was because Jeffrey Epstein had either assaulted or hit on or just something to a young woman that Trump had been employing, and Trump basically said, no, you can't do that. Interesting to see if that's true. But definitely from the files, there's definitely more evidence that Trump was on the wrong side of this than the right. Yeah, exactly. If you were even hanging out with Epstein, like you were on the wrong side of this.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know that not everyone named in the files is a criminal and participated in these activities. Not everyone who visited the island did that, those activities like Stephen Hawking and a lot of people. But we can, like you said, the public can draw their own conclusions whether or not they persecute. So Trump recently said that he never visited the island, and I thought that was bullshit. So I looked it up, and there's actually no hard evidence that proves that he actually went to the island, which I thought was pretty interesting because I thought that was already proven. What we do know is that he was on the flight logs for Epstein's private jet. I think it was 8 times he was listed on the flight logs, and these were going to, from New York and Florida back and forth into some other places. But yeah, there's no hard evidence that he actually visited the island, but we know that he's lying about just the Epstein files in general, because he also said that he never was on his plane. He never went on Epstein's plane, but then we can see with flight logs and pictures and other government records that he was indeed on the plane with Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, and a lot of these people that were the 10 co-conspirators that were a part of this whole sex trafficking ring. So yeah, I think whether or not we get criminal prosecutions that actually go through the courts, that sounds pretty unlikely with what we're seeing, but we as the public can stop supporting these people. And people can wake up and realize that, like you said, more plausible than not, Trump was deeply involved with Epstein and the sex trafficking stuff. And like you can see, like all the crazy stuff. I encourage people to take a look at this new drop of Epstein files, because it is just, like you said, it is a lot of like satanic. They're eating people. There's like claims of eating babies. There's, like you said, with the girls being brought up, and yeah, it's just absolutely disgusting. And these are just accusations, but you look at, kind of compare everything, and it it seems more likely than not. So see where that goes. We also know, I was going to say that we know that Trump fought so hard to not release the files and got Pam Bondi on board and everyone to delay it as much as possible when they finally had to. So we know he's trying to hide something. So that just makes you kind of believe more that, that he was likely to do this. And then another thing that I forgot to mention was there's a lot of new information suggesting, again, not proving that. I mean, we know that this whole operation involved a lot of powerful people, but I think it's a lot bigger than some people believe, because there's emails talking about Epstein meeting directly with Vladimir Putin and just like absolute top world leaders, a bunch of presidents. We know that Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who also mysteriously died randomly, was a Mossad agent, could have been like 3 or 4 times private agent for CIA, MI6. And there's also a lot of evidence suggesting that Epstein might have been the same with Mossad or Arab intelligence, Syrian intelligence. So it is just the sheer scale of the connections and power is just incredible.
Yeah, and I think I don't want it to get lost that what Jeffrey Epstein did for a living was he managed people's assets. I think the name for it is a financier. So that's why he had so many rich and wealthy people around him. That's literally what he did. He helped them manage their own finances. So then he naturally was around all of these people. That's how he made so many friends. That's why he has pictures with Bill Gates, pictures with Stephen Hawking. And I think Stephen Hawking might have even gone to the island. I forget.
He did,
yeah.
Or he was at least on the flight logs. Maybe not to the island. But
imagine that boy at the island.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. I just think I think the more we hear, the more horrified we should be about the Epstein files. And I think it's also just, if anything, it's a commentary on like human nature. Like, what are you going to do when you have that much power, when you can get away with stuff? Because he did get away with it for a while.
Yeah.
This is a years-long operation.
Another thing to keep in mind is that he was formally first convicted in, I think it was 2006 or 2009, and they gave him this sweet plea deal where he got like a year in jail, and he only had to spend the nights in jail. Like, he could just do whatever he wanted the rest of the day. And then it was only in 2019 that he was actually convicted and then died in prison. So over 20 years, you have to assume that the evidence has been tampered with. Some of it has been destroyed. And then when it comes to just exporting these emails and getting pictures of these documents, there's a lot of typos, a lot of grammatical issues that just come from the process of copying things over and getting everything digitized and stuff like that. So it makes it just a lot harder, that much harder to formally prosecute for this.
Yeah. But
moving on, so Liam Ramos is back home in Minnesota with his father. So this was the 5-year-old boy that was detained with his father by ICE agents a few weeks ago. He was taken to this was in Minnesota. He was taken to a Texas detention facility. They were trying to deport the father, and their attorney or federal judge ruled that they had to come back. So they're now home and safe, which is good to hear. But this just kind of shows that ICE is not doing their job correctly, and I want to point out some facts here to prove that. So the ICE and DHS said that the father, when they detained him, that he fled on foot and left the kid, and they had to go chase him down. Other sources say that he didn't, that he cooperated. We know that they used the 5-year-old as bait, essentially, to see if the mom was home and go open the door. And then they claim that he entered the U.S. illegally in December of 2024 from Ecuador, but their attorney says that he has a pending asylum case because he did enter legally, and they're just going through the process of the course, which takes forever. So that's he was here legally. And then the main thing I want to point out here is that the Justice Department's executive office for immigration reviews online court docket shows no future hearings for Liam's father. So they either went off this, not fact, just basis that he entered the country illegally and detained him, or they basically just can't prove that he was here illegally, so they're just giving up. Mm-hmm. But this shows that they are able to actually detain people and travel them thousands of miles away from home to a detention facility and keep them there away from their family and away from work on something that they can't even prove that they did. Mm-hmm. So all this does is traumatize this 5-year-old boy, and just shows that ICE and DHS do not have the facts, and they are not accurately going about their operations. And then the U.S. District Judge Fred Beery, who was the one who I believe ruled that they had to come home, he blasted the administration, writing, "The case has its genesis in the ill-conceived and incompetently implemented government pursuit of daily deportation quotas, apparently if it requires traumatizing children." So I brought up, I think the last episode, they have a deportation quota of like 3,000 a day. So they're just showing that it's just incompetently implemented, as he said. I think it's a great way to put it. And something obviously needs to be done and changed.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note like that this situation spells out the problem with ICE, because if let's say that the father did run away or something like that, because something like that had to have happened for them to use him as bait. Otherwise, I don't think they would have necessarily detained the father and then just tried to get someone else's bait. I think that the most charitable interpretation would be they had the kid and then they wanted to see if the mother was home to take care of the kid. But at the same time, I hear reporting that they were knocking on the door and the neighbors told the mom not to open the door. Gee, I wonder why they told her not to open the door. Maybe she was also, even if she wasn't undocumented, I bet you unless she was white, she probably had some fear of what the ICE agents would do to her. And, oh, gee, shocker, look what they're doing to U.S. citizens, let alone people who are not white. So of course she was going to be terrified. I'm sure she wanted to get her son and all that, but she felt afraid. And that's the problem. I think that first things first, we need to be focusing on safety and actually focusing on what matters, not necessarily just someone's immigration status. That should be focused on more in like civil court and stuff like that, in my opinion. I don't think that they should be afraid that they're about to get arrested and deported when you're trying to return their son to you, or they're trying to return your son to you. But she had to have that fear because she knew that was their capability, because without a judicial warrant, they're technically not supposed to enter the home. But if she would have opened the door and came out and all that, they could just arrest her if they did have an administrative warrant, which I'm not saying they did, but maybe that was her concern. That sounds like that probably was. That's why she didn't open the door. If she was in the house, from the reporting I've seen, she was in the house. And I also saw reporting that there was another person around who could have taken Liam as well, like a neighbor. I know it might be hard, like don't just hand him off to some random person, but at the same time, you're traumatizing him. Masked federal agents taking a child, and then he gets all sick. That's not a good sign. The place they were staying was apparently filthy. That's not a good sign. It's just a terrible situation overall. And they wouldn't have had to use him as bait, and it wouldn't have even been seen as bait if they didn't have the agenda of deporting all these people simply for the reason of them being here illegally, even when they have legal avenues going forward. And then they just take away those legal avenues and then act like they're some terrible person who shouldn't be here. And also I want to point out something that I believe it was $97 billion. $97 billion in federal tax money. That's how much undocumented immigrants contribute each year.
Oh, really?
$97 billion for sales tax, all that kind of stuff. Even though they don't reap really any federal benefits, that's how much they contribute. Because I had some dude at the tabling tell me that, the reason why they should be deported if they were here for 30 years, even if they haven't committed a violent crime, is because they've been just sucking us dry and they haven't been contributing any taxes. And I was like, no, they do contribute taxes I think you're just a little bit ignorant of that. I didn't say it like that, but
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it's true. So, but yeah, do you want to kind of run through the rest of the next 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll be done in just a sec. I do want to say that I want to research this more, but it might be proven, not certain, might be proven that immigrants are a net positive to our country. I do need to look into that more, but yeah, that also defeats his claim. So moving through really quick with Iran, just a few things to note here. So we're ramping up our military in the Persian Gulf. We have a few carriers over there, and we're really escalating things. It's not looking good. Nuclear deal talks are expected this Friday, which is the first meeting between the U.S. and Iranian officials since June of last year. And as of today, I'm just going to quote this CNN portion because they worded it really nice, but they said a U.S. aircraft carrier shot down an Iranian drone that aggressively approached the ship in the Arabian Sea on Tuesday, hours before two gunboats operated by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps approached a U.S.-flagged tanker in the Strait of Hormuz and threatened to board and seize the ship, according to U.S. military spokesman. So this just shows, again, days before they're supposed to meet, it's really not looking good. There's a lot of, I don't know, I guess just aggression, and this was a oil tanker that was flagged under the U.S. that these two gunboats said they were gonna seize it. This was not a U.S. military tanker, which would be a huge difference. But U.S. military heard of this and they escorted the tanker out of there, and luckily it calmed down after that. But yeah, then this drone approached the ship. They shot it down. Hopefully, I don't know. We'll see where this goes, but we absolutely do not need to go to war with Iran or advocate and put ourselves into some sort of regime change either.
Facts. I agree.
That's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the WSU Democrats podcast. I hope you guys have a nice day or night, everybody. See you later.